See, thought has produced tremendous effects outwardly, and we'll discuss further on, it produces tremendous effects inwardly in each person. And yet, the general tacit assumption in thought is that it's just telling you the way things are, not doing anything, and that you are inside there deciding what to do with that information. But I want to say that you don't decide what to do with the information. The information takes over and runs you. You see, that thought runs you. But it also gives the false information that you are running it, right? That you are the one who controls thought, whereas thought is the one who controls each one of us, right? We don't, those, until thought is understood, which, or better yet, more than understood, perceived, it will actually control us, but create the impression that it is our servant. It is just doing what we want it to do. Now, see, that's the difficulty. The thought is participating, and then saying it's not participating, it's taking part, it's in everything.
Maybe the new physics has fundamentally altered the way in which we conceive of reality. Could you talk a little bit about that?
You probably mean by the new physics, relativity and quantum theory. Well, I have my way of looking at it. I say that they show that reality is an undivided whole. It is not that the notion of breaking things up into separate parts which just interact is not adequate. Now, that actually relativity, for example, says the world is an undivided whole. It would say basically all is one as a field spread out through space, and even what we call a particle is a region of concentrated field that stays together and moves as a unit, and it spreads out and merges with another particle and so on. So in reality we don't have that much those particles anymore. And now in quantum theory you have a much more thoroughgoing wholeness, which would, I could say has three features. One, the quantum process is supposed to be indivisible, an elementary process. And it's as if every step were a link which cannot be divided. So in principle, the universe cannot be divided. But we can make an approximate division because there are so many links. And like many grains of sand appear to be continuous now. So on the large scale, the ordinary idea is recovered, where you can approximately separate. Then the second point is you have this wave-particle duality. An electron behaves both like a wave and a particle, and a typical experiment is this, that we have an interference experiment, two slits, which you may have heard of. The electrons pass through those slits. Now, they show an interference pattern. Now, if this were a wave, we could understand it, because waves from going through one slit could cancel the waves from another slit at certain points, producing no effect. And they'd add in another place and produce fringes. So it looks as if the electron came in as a particle and spread out into a wave and then became a particle again. Now, this behavior seems so mysterious that people like Niels Bohr said that there was no way to understand it intuitively at all. You could only calculate the probabilities. Right? As the third point was the non-locality, namely an action at a distance. That we find particles in certain circumstances can apparently act on each other at long distances, directly faster than light, although we can't use it to transmit a signal.
Many scientists are trying to establish unity among different sciences. This may be done on a mechanistic basis. This is the most common way it's being done now. But see, if we could try to bring about the unity on a less mechanistic basis, this would move toward bridging the gap. You see, I think the gap now is that most of our culture is, at least in the scientific technical side, is mechanistic. And we're living a mechanistic life. You see, if you went back to the earlier times of the hunter-gatherer societies, or like the North American Indians, then they really see the universe as spirit. In other words, in daily life, they see nature as, they see the trees and the animals as spirit. They're not saying that this is just a myth, a nice mythology, but rather that is their mode of experiencing and perceiving the world. Now, so that there's no conflict between spirituality and their mode of perceiving the world. But we have a conflict because science and technology have developed basically in a mechanistic way, and therefore we will see a difference when we carry out our everyday life and some of our ideas. Now, I think we have to move toward coherence, so we can't establish coherence right away, totally. And one move toward coherence is to establish a unity of science on a non-mechanistic basis. I've tried to say that psychology and physics might have a certain unity through the implicate order. So that would be a move in that direction. Now, eventually this coherence would only come about if we actually were not to see these objects as a machine, as mechanistic. You see, we are seeing everything as a machine, and to a certain extent it is a machine, as a certain approximation. But if we were actually seeing the world as infused with spirit, rather than sort of just talking about it that way, while we use mechanism in our daily life. Now, I think that that as a scientist, that would be the principal thing he could do. The other side of the thing he could do would be to try to engage in dialogue, to establish a dialogue in science, to establish a greater coherence among human beings. And this is not easy because science ought to be open to dialogue, but in fact it isn't very open to dialogue as it has developed now. It tends to contain a belief in the final truth of what science is aiming at, which is incompatible, incoherent. So the movement toward dialogue would be what anybody might do toward establishing, sort of bringing greater spirituality into life.
But at a certain stage, money becomes a value in itself. When you have enough, it begins to give you a feeling which is good, and then that makes you value money just for the sake of money, right?
So then it's the feeling that
Yeah. You see, values are power, they're strength, right? A value liberates strength in you, it liberates energy, right? Now, the kind of energy that it liberates may itself be sensed as valuable, right? And also the lack of that energy is sensed as no value, right? Or negative value. Okay? So therefore we begin to value our values, and that makes it hard to change the value. You see, suppose I begin valuing money because I need it, right? To buy food and so on. Gradually I get more and more money, and I get used to certain comforts, and I value it because I need those comforts, right? And then I get still more money, more than I can possibly spend, but I still value it because now it gives me a sense of power and strength, and when I think of all that money, it feels good inside, right? If I think of losing it, it feels very bad. See, if the stock market is high, I say, look, I have X million, $100 million. It feels good. Now the stock market has dropped and I've lost a third of it. You see, it's almost like losing a third of myself.
The question is, does the I really exist, or is it an illusion? If it is an illusion, how is it that we appear to be able to create or think a thought? Is the I really separate from thought?
Yes, well, to put it briefly, I'd say the I as we know it is not separate from thought. That the I which feels itself to be separate is thought. Now, there was an ancient view of the self, which was that I am the unknown. I'm an unknown which is constantly revealing itself, right? Which is different from the ordinary concept of the self, right? Which is something known with identity. The self is something with identity over time and limited, right? It's supposed to be, but also unlimited, because you have this megalomania, this wish to make the self, it doesn't want to stay limited, right?
Yes.
Now, how could the self be thought? You see, you have to see how thought works. You see, let's come back. First of all, if you see a television program with a telephone bell in there and the bell rings, your thought immediately attributes it to the image, and you experience it coming from the image. There's nothing there in the image at all, right? But suppose nobody gets up to ring the bell. There's an to answer the phone. There's an incoherence, and you wonder, where is it coming from? It may be coming from the next room. Then you see it differently, right? So the point is that thought can attribute to real things, to put shape and form and figure into them and make them seem what something else, right? Like if you take the rainbow, it's nothing but rain falling and light refracting off the raindrops, right? But you see a bow. There's a figure thrown onto the raindrops. Is that clear?
Yes.
Everybody sees the same bow. That's proof. It should be you guys' proof. It must be there, right?
Right.
But it's not there.
But in fact, everyone sees a different one.
He sees his own rainbow.
Everyone sees his own
but very
rainbow.
similar.
Yeah.
That's what the chairs seem the same way, right?
Of course. Yeah.
So there's an appearance which is not an appearance of, that bow is not a correct appearance of reality, right?
Mm-hmm. And yet there's a tacit agreement that it is.
Well, people now know that it's not there, you see, but they don't.
I didn't know.
They used to say, chase the rainbow and find
Right.
a pot of gold at the end.
Of course. But in fact, I don't know that it's common knowledge that what we're all looking at is different rainbows.
Yeah.
The assumption
But I mean,
is-
but at least they're all related to a chair, but in the case of the rainbow, they're not related, they're
At
only
all.
related to the drops of rain, you see, not to a
Absolutely.
bow. Now this is crucial, because if you can throw onto the drops of rain a bow, you could throw on any shape onto the drops of rain, and everybody might agree that that's it, right?
Mhm.
Now, consciousness is full of all sorts of events going on, feelings, little things going on here and there.
Mhm.
And the thought throws onto it a shape called me. You see, at a center, you may feel it to be in the solar plexus or the chest or the head.
Can we stop again? You're saying thought projects that?
Yes, as it's projected the rainbow. If you, right?
So thought creates the me rather than me creating.
Yes. But then if you don't see that happening, you will treat that as real and give it apparent reality. If you will take action, the whole being will take actions on that basis, which seem to be coming from the center. As the telephone sound seems to be coming from the from the television image, when it couldn't possibly be doing so.
But it has to be gaining some kind of strength if it's capable of, in fact, thinking about a specific.
Well, the strength comes from your whole being. You see, there's thoughts. And remember, the nature of thought is conditioned reflex.
Oh, right.
One thought leads to another,
Right.
to another. You don't have to do anything.
Yeah, it's doing it for you.
Yeah.
It's doing it for you. And
Yes.
For me.
Remember, thought is conditioned reflex at a very high, subtle level. And it just goes by itself, but it has in it the thought that thought is being produced by a center which it calls me. And all the feelings which should belong to that center are thrown onto the consciousness as if from me, right?
And in fact, our society reinforces that.
Everybody says the same, like everybody sees the same rainbow, everybody sees the same self, whether it's there or not, right?
But is anything perceiving anything else?
No, you see, I'm trying to say that we have also part of our language which says that if anything is perceived, there must be something else to perceive it. But that may not be so. You see, that may be getting in the way, right? Say, why can't we say that consciousness, the stream of consciousness, can be aware of itself? Or you see that we don't need a separate perceiver to perceive.
But then it would also be hard for this consciousness only to be sort of physical Newtonian matter.
No, we're not saying it's just physical and time matter, but I said before, I think, that matter may be unlimited in its subtlety. See, in other words, that's part of the trouble with our thought, which said, that matter is very limited, and that it's only this or this or this, and that which wouldn't be able to do this at all, right? But then it suggests that we already know everything about matter, you see, but saying that it's crucial to say we don't know everything about matter, right?
But are we suggesting that there is matter, that matter can perceive?
I don't know what perceive, we won't not come to that, but matter is capable of something far more subtle than we might think, right? Now, at the very least, it's going to respond to perception in new ways, you see. For example, a new perception might begin to change some of these synapses, or, these things that are rigidly stuck and so on. We'll come to that later.
Saying that we have got to do something about this thought, right? We can't just let it go on destroying us. I mean, just if you've got a cancer growing in you, you say, well, at some stage I better do something about it. Now, cancer starts to grow slowly, but at some stage it starts to grow very fast and spread. And you say the quicker you do something about it, the better. And that's really where we are, you see. Now, but then what do you do about it? You see, you can't cut out thought. I mean, we couldn't do without it, right? You can't just say, all the bad thoughts are going to be cut out, you see. You can't select them all and cut them out. And so we have to go into it more deeply. I say this is not an obvious thing, you see. It's very subtle. And it goes very deep, you see. right? Now, we want to get to the root of it, right? To the base, to the source of it. You see, if you imagine a stream which is being polluted near the source, and people downstream don't know about that, so they start removing bits of pollution, trying to purify their water, but perhaps introducing more pollution of another kind as they do so. And therefore, what we've got to do is to see this whole stream and get to the source of it. You see, somewhere at the source of thought it is being polluted. That's the suggestion. It is being diverted in some way. It is going in we say taking a wrong turn, but it's taking a wrong turn all the time. You see, you could say in one sense when they started pouring pollution in, that was the wrong step. But the fact they keep on pouring it in is the main point. It's pouring in all the time. So therefore, the source is not in time. Not to go back to ancient times when it may have started, but rather the source is always now. That's what we have to look into, you see.